everyone. Welcome to Unapologetically You. And today I am hosting Unapologetically You, but I'm starting on a bit of a somber note. Kelly and I have spoken offline, and she's going through quite a busy period. She always has been busy, and she's carved out time for the podcast, but now that busy time is kind of erupted, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing with you that she just needs to take time out for herself. She's being pulled in different directions, and one of the things that she is trying to prioritize is her own self-care. And so the fact is, this whole podcast is about health and wellness and being unapologetically ourselves, right? So she won't be joining me for the rest of season 5. So you'll just have to put up with me in the meantime. And I hope you join me in wishing Kelly lots of time for her phase of her journey at this time. And today's podcast, actually, I've invited Jesse Banovic, who is a yoga practitioner. She is someone who loves to dance. She is into creative movement. And during the pandemic, she actually discovered her love for somatic movement. So we delve into, what was her background into yoga? What did she do whilst she went through the pandemic, and how her practices and attitude have evolved into who she is now and who she's becoming. And so we're going to delve into her philosophy and debunk some of those yoga myths that sometimes we end up latching onto in the Western world. And then hopefully, well, actually, she actually does speak about some really, really good, amazing nuggets the questions that we can ask ourselves during this podcast. So this is a podcast that you really do want to listen again, and then also send it to a friend. But please do engage with our podcast. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button on the video so more people can find videos like this for them and support their health and wellness. And if you're not already subscribed, subscribe. This is the same for Spotify as well. You can click us and a follow button and let us know if you agree or disagree of any of the discussions that we've had today. So we appreciate you so much. Let's delve straight into the podcast with Jesse Banovic. Hi, Jesse. I'm so happy that you were able to make this podcast. And we've not known each other for a very long time. We actually met on a retreat, which was just incredible. You actually hosted a few of the things for us to enjoy. But first, I would like our audience to get to know you a little bit better. Did you get into yoga teacher training? What expectations did you have of yoga? And how has that practice changed since you first started?
That's a big question and a good one because it's changed immensely. So a little snapshot of the last 15 or so years. I started my training in Ashtanga, which is a really different style of practice. I did that in my early 20s. And that was following a adolescent career in dance and movement. So I was very more like classically trained in ballet, contemporary, bit of jazz and those kind of and a bit of like salsa and like real different kind of movement. And then I was going to go down the more kind of official route with university and like the expected route. And I parked my movement career for a bit. And so then I kind of matched up with the yoga, and my mum's also a yoga teacher. So she kind of was very influential in that new path. And that's what led me to take the Ashtanga course, which is really different to what I do now. So that was a long time ago. And then I'd completed the course and realized it was not really for me at the time to deliver. It was quite a disciplined course, very like high achieving driven, i.e. like the asana and physical practice was very testing on the body. So I kind of parked that for a little bit, and then later in my 20s I found the vinyasa course, And that was a lot more softer and creative, and you could use music. And I it was also ran by two women from Sweden, a lovely duo called True North Vinyasa, who I'm should be working with next year, which is great. And they just reconnected me with yoga and my practice and my love for teaching. So fast forward to late 20s, I then came back, delivered a retreat in Portugal, and one in England, and then started teaching in the Cotswolds and in Wiltshire. So that was really lovely. And then we had the pandemic, which obviously, we all know, put us on hold, on pause for a while. I got locked down at my mother's for a little bit, and she had a yoga studio in the garden. So we were very privileged, very lucky, fortunate to have that opportunity to then go online, which a lot of teachers turn to.
Mhm.
It was really helpful because it allowed a lot of teachers to hone their craft in cueing, i.e., like bringing a better description to the movement, which I think a lot of teachers would agree was we might have overlooked some of that and just assumed that students knew what we were doing. So it
Mm.
allowed us to be a lot more precise and clear with what we were instructing, because you had to just listen and occasionally watch online on Zoom. So that really helped. And then I got really unwell. I contracted pneumonia from the Delta COVID at the time in 2020, October of 2020, and was out of action for at least a year properly. I couldn't walk properly for about 3 months. I was like crawling around. My lungs had just completely given up. So yeah, I was very, very unwell and had to retrain my lungs and my breath and my strength, and saw a mixture of different therapists and health practitioners, and then ended up meeting a functional medicine practitioner who really helped me, Breenan Dolan. And yeah, I to this day still occasionally drop in with her and have a check-in, and yeah, so really grateful for that. And then that led me to my somatic practice. So from being very, very ill and weak and not able to do any physical practice, I mean, even a child's pose or sitting cross-legged was like testing on my upper body. Laying down was okay, or on my side, but anything on the back or strengthening in any way, even just weight on the hands, just weight bearing, was too much. So I'd go back and rest if I'd done that for even half a minute or anything. So I naturally kind of found this love for rolling around on the floor, which it really is. And anyone who practices with me will know that. They're like, she just gets us to roll around on the floor. And my teacher, Charlotte Watts, will say that too when she teaches us and we're in workshops. She's like, yeah, occasionally people just think that I'm a bit, wild for just asking students to roll about. But that's taking us back to a primal state. It's taking us back to how we are known, like our bodies are made to move, like on all fours, animal like movement, really exploring different planes of the body,
Mm.
not just like up, down, maybe even in sun salutations, or if you're running forward and back or on a bike, you're very forward and backward motion. So somatics is very much about opening diagonal planes and lines and different energy centers, essentially.
Mm.
And I won't get too into it today. It's quite deep, but there's different koshas in yoga philosophy, and we kind of break down those different sheaths within the body. So that's very much getting into that deeper space. So
Wow, there's so much to unpack in that. And thank you so much for kind of delving into the Pandora's box of where you started and where you're evolving to. There's two things I do want to unpack actually. First, you talked about you contracting COVID. Now, like when we were at this retreat, Jesse and I just ended up delving so deep into how she overcame COVID, and it's so interesting. And Jesse, I would love if you can share that with our audience. And then the second thing I would like to ask is, can we delve a little bit more into somatic yoga? Like, I know they talk about there is trauma within the body. We've talked about it in our podcast, Kelly and I. And with this in particular, I just want for people to understand what the association is with the koshas and trauma healing, somatic therapy, essentially. So yeah, can we start off with yeah, you said about how tough it was to do very minor movements, but like give us some more detail. We love deep conversations on this podcast, so give us some more detail.
Great. That's what excites me is the deep conversations. So yeah, you touched on it with the trauma and tension. So I meant to cover that. So somatic movement compared to maybe a vinyasa class would very much be aimed at releasing trauma and tension. That's the main focus. So we don't say it is therapy. We say it is working in a therapeutic approach. Yeah. So there's a slight difference there. And you can eradicate, chronic pain, muscular pain. It helps with posture. It can help with tension headaches. Obviously, if we're reducing stress levels in the body, we're noticing often the symptoms soften as well from whatever we're suffering with. Now, that is quite a broad statement. We have to be careful, and I'm aware of that. So generally, we're noticing when people's stress levels go down, their symptoms ease overall. So when we're stagnant and we're not moving, and even in the fascia, the muscles, the connective tissues, they get tight, they get a bit like niggly, like little like crystals, or like in your feet. If you're ever massaging your feet and you find those crystals, you kind of find the knots in the shoulders or little hard spots in and around the muscles when we're moving or being massaged. It's that bit that we're trying to kind of break down into. So my favorite prop, I always say to students, is the floor. Yeah, I don't really use props at all. I use my body and the floor. And so, I was actually at ecstatic dance last night, and that's what I do to kind of help my somatic practice, and my idea process and creative journeying for class sequencing. And that was very much about, being on the back, rolling across onto the side, and easing back and forth, and seeing where there might be tension, holding on, working with the breath. So, holding the breath in one of those slightly awkwardly looking poses, which actually once you release the body is really comfortable, but someone might think, stretching in a diagonal star shape and it looks a bit bizarre. But if you really drop in and notice the breath and where we're holding on, maybe that's in the glutes or the belly or the fingers or wherever, once you start really releasing and matching body and breath, and having a bit of a creative journey with it, that's when some nice results start to come. Saying that, I've moved my body for a really long time, and I know it's very easy to sit here and say that, 15, 20 years plus of movement. I mean, yeah, I did the dance since I was 5. So it's in my muscle memory. It's very much there. It's very easy. It's my creative outlet. It's my language. Now, a lot of people I'm seeing and I'm aware of, there's the block, and we call this sensory motor amnesia. So this is called SMA and somatics, where the muscles, the body almost kind of gets stuck in that story of, I'm stagnant, I've been sat on a chair, I've been head down with the phone. It's easier to go back to that pattern. Yeah. So we're trying to reverse that with the somatic practice and then make the open movement, the expression, the creativity, the new pattern that's remembered. Drop the shoulders, release the jaw, not have tight fists. Like, even when we sat down, I noticed a lot of people, if they're cross-legged, their foot's flexed. that shows me that their body, I bet you're doing it now. In fact, I was doing it until I was like,
I'm
relax.
so relaxed. I actually am so relaxed, but I thought you might call me out on crossing my legs. I've got this, I shouldn't cross my legs, but I'm just so chill. But yes, no foot flexion here.
Drop shoulders, relax jaw. So, you know, there's little things like that, but I'm always looking at bodies and I'm fascinated. I'm at the airport later, I'm sure I'll be doing that and be like, oh, you know, where I can see and observe tension and tightness. And I just want to like get everyone rolling around on the floor in the airport.
I love it when you're so passionate about something. And I remember doing the same. You know what? I was reflecting about like a lot of the race team right now are in Monaco. And this podcast won't air until a little bit later in the year. But what I found really funny is when I was there, we were walking on the beach and it was so funny because I'm watching people run and I'm looking at the gait patterns and I was like, that's really atrocious. They should be running this way. They're running so inefficiently. And that's when I was actually, that was such a long time ago now. I was actually getting into strength and conditioning at that point. So, you know, you're looking at the biomechanics, you're looking at the gait, you're looking at all the physiology type of things. And I'd already been in, you know, the fitness industry and management area for a good few years. So I absolutely resonate with you when you say you see these patterns everywhere. It's really hard not to. And when you do absolutely love what you do and you want to improve and constantly curious about things, you're kind of assessing the terrain wherever you go, right?
Mm, yeah, but that's really on point. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's language, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I know I asked you two big questions, but can you kind of go back to when you were talking about how you surrendered to COVID, like what happened, and then how did you pick yourself back up? Because I found this story absolutely fascinating, and I know the listeners will too. So tell us what happened.
Okay. So the summarized version is that I contracted the pneumonia in October 2020. We were obviously just going into autumn winter season. Um, and at the time I was living in quite an old flat, beautiful old flat in the Cotswolds, but the heating wasn't great. So it was even colder. So my body was really under its stress. And I was also in a relationship that was kind of coming to its end. So there was like emotional stuff, the physical, the mental pressure, because I wasn't working. A lot of the country, you know, had those similar issues as well. Put all three together, the nervous system is just completely on like flat. It's got, there's no reserves at that point. So I do feel like it was a bit of a miracle story, actually. I do, I really do. And you know, a few years on, it's so lovely to share it in a really strong way, rather than, you know, it doesn't upset me anymore. I feel empowered to share it completely. And if you see on Instagram, I do cite that time a lot. So it was a time where I thought I wanted to seek Western medicine at first, because I remember calling, you know, the helpline 111. I think it was. I don't ever use Western medicine, but at the time I did. I was in crisis mode. I was like, ah, and they said, you are still able to hold a sentence together on the phone, therefore you don't qualify to be coming into hospital today. Now, that was when we were obviously at the peak of the pandemic. The elderly and the vulnerable were prioritized. I didn't know I had an underlying health condition at that time. I thought I had adrenal fatigue in my 20s, which wasn't really recognized in Western medicine. It is now, I think. You know, the endocrine system is being, and hormones and everything are really being looked into a lot more seriously. So I was denied access into hospital, and that meant no access to antibiotics. Anyone who contracts pneumonia these days would have antibiotics. I'm pretty certain that that is what was given. So anyway, I dug deep, and I kind of, that was my situation, and I turned to my practice. I know that for many people would sound a little bit out there, a little bit new age. But I turned to my practice. I turned to old, traditional, and ancient methods of how we would have healed sickness. So I called some friends, and one of them is a aromatherapist and a reflexology practitioner that used to work with me. And she said, and someone who I really respect for wisdom and health insights. And she said, all I can offer you is to do a steam, try and work with that, a few hours a day. I mean, I didn't have anything else to do other than focus on getting better, so that was all I was doing. So I did a steam bowl. You kind of put a piece of cloth over the head and 1 or 2 drops of lavender or ulpus oil to inhale. There's a couple of times when I put too much oil in and it definitely went up the nose. However, I stuck with that practice for a few weeks. I really religiously did that. That was one thing. So much rest. So you said surrendering into rest. I mean, at that point, the body is almost like, it's time to go.
Forcing you. You're like literally like, you haven't rested enough. I'm gonna knock you
I
down.
felt so weak in my life, like, and also for a woman, you're experiencing your menstrual cycle. So there was one cycle in that. Oh my word, I couldn't even. I mean, I could describe it. That would be a whole nother podcast and maybe a good theme for another one. To experience a cycle during such ill health, I was like a zombie. I remember feeling like people, like I was being like vampires were sucking blood out of every part of my body. It felt like it was just drained beyond belief. There was nothing left. So I had the steam, and I turned to my practice with meditation. I had no physical practice at that point, so and before that I had a meditation practice. I dabbled in yoga nidra, but I didn't really. Yoga nidra is non-sleep deep rest, just for listeners. Sorry, just remember to cite that. So I really turned to that. So the Raja yoga, the mind yoga. I was in meditation or deep rest, like, not just resting, but like intentional non-sleep deep rest for up to 2 hours a day. And that, I mean, sometimes if I was tired, I would just drift off to sleep, and that meant the body needed the sleep. But I was really trying to use that power of the mind to change the mindset, because you can imagine, like, that was a lot of anxiety and depression around that time as well, because you just kind of start to give up. And like, why is this happening to me? Why is my body failing? Those kind of negative limiting belief patterns. And then I started turning it around with my sankalpa, my affirmations, things I didn't really work with before. I was aware of, but I wasn't really connected, even as a teacher, because we're always learning as a teacher, aren't we? So I really turned to the non-sleep deep rest, the yoga nidra, and the power of meditation. When I say meditation, though, I think I used to apply it for like 10 minutes and think, I've done my meditation practice. And now it's like, God, you need just 10 minutes just to kind of settle and wriggle around and stop thinking about that food shop or who you're meeting for dinner or da 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 da. I'm talking like an hour minimum to get into good practice. And that's when the nervous system starts to really have the healing. And that's what I believe was really the game changer for me. So my mindset shifted. I literally visualized being well. I visualized color, warmth in my lungs. Blue, for me, everyone has different associations with color. I work with color a lot in my visualizations and my meditation practice with students. I think you might have heard one when I delivered it at 42 Acres. With Idle and Wonder, by the way, which was magical. So I visualized blue and maybe like a gray and sometimes black, kind of, for me, what seemed quite sad, deep, dark, negative colors. And I transformed that into warmth, radiant, orange, glow, yellow. So I used a lot of that in the lung space. And I worked with that repeatedly over days, weeks, months. And I just kept using that, actually. Even if I kind of started to get better, sometimes I'd relapse. I would think I'd be okay to go down to the shop and just get some bread. And then I was on a hill, so walking up the hill, I was then out of action for a week because I'd walked up the hill. Yeah. I mean, I really like, I could talk about this a lot more. There's a whole story around like the progression and the
Mm.
relapse journey and how many times that happened. And any friends who were close with me at the time speaking to me, family, were like, you know, they just didn't know what it, they just looked like an alien almost, because they were like, how you just like walk down the stairs? It can't be that bad, you know. And we because no one knew, no one really knew the extent of what it was doing. And essentially, I had just this inflammation build up, which I'm still investigating. Although I am well now, I can teach, I can run up hills, I can lift things. My endurance and stamina can be a little bit negotiated at times. Like it depends time my cycle. It depends how much sleep I've had. It depends how much stress I'm under. You know, all those factors that we know can induce pain or inflammation or suffering in the body. Now that has to be like a daily practice for me. I have to manage that on quite a micro level to manage my health and manage my work, and so I can show up for my teaching and clients and such. So yeah, so that's a really long answer.
No, that was amazing. And that was the short version. That wasn't even the relapse and things like that. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I love when somebody says they're able to talk about something quite traumatic in their life, quite life altering, transformational, but in such a different way. Like it doesn't, you don't cry, or you're not as emotional as you first were when you started telling that story. And it's really funny because I understand when, if people haven't gone through this extent of pain, of trying to recover from, trying to do things for yourself in that way, unless people haven't gone through that, they don't understand how difficult it is to catch your breath, how debilitating it is just to go to the bathroom and come back again. It's like you're wiped. That tiny bit of energy that the resource that your body's clinging onto is all needed to recover, to heal. And what you've then described is almost like what you're changing your epigenetics, because the disease, the pain that's actually changing your body, your cells are transforming into these viruses and the bacteria is growing. But what you were doing is almost like isolating those tiny areas which felt like they were everywhere, and then changing the epigenetics of that virus, and just to go, it's, I see you, but there's more of us. There's more healthy of us. So how
Mm.
can we kind of block you down, not kind of like dwindle your power, I guess. And I feel like it's really interesting that you say that, because for me, when I started doing, I kind of had like a rebirth of yoga journey. I did yoga years and years ago when I was about 17, 18 years old. And then, you end up doing a little bit more movement stuff. You be probably a little bit more physical, and you kind of get into the cycle of going to work, coming home, doing all these different things. And when I began getting back into yoga, it started with the yin yoga. And for those people, again, I don't know, it's more of a movement based practice, but you solely focus on one movement for a couple of minutes, for a couple of breaths. So the longer you can hold it, the better. And for me, I wanted to move. I needed to move, but I was physically, mentally, emotionally drained. Like I've never felt that type of fatigue without being ill, if that makes sense. And I wasn't diagnosed as, having burnout or anything like that, but I physically, for a few years after that, I just said I was on the brink of burnout. I'd so like back out of that, officially calling it burnout, even though I had all the symptoms, even though I had all of the you know, going through the phases of it. And then I realized, actually, even though I got into yin yoga, a lot of people in the West end up going to these popular vinyasa hot yoga classes. And it's almost like that in itself is a period of busyness, isn't it? It's like go there, get sweaty, get toned, leave. And the period where most people can actually just zen out, which is the last part of your practice, and it's quite an important part of the practice, is called Shavasana, when you're lying there and you integrate. Now, for me, for a long time, I, from personal examples and for people, would find that boring. Like, okay, I need to get up and do stuff now. So I know that your practice has evolved. And what I'm trying to ask now is going, what have you seen in the Western world that is shifting, in terms of where you started with Ashtanga and where you are now with somatic practicing? How are you seeing, what are the common myths that people have of yoga, and even in when you're teaching, do you have people come up to you and going, I didn't expect that, but it's opened up a whole new world for me?
Yes. Funny enough, that actually happened last week. I was doing a somatic pop-up class, and one of the ladies had come to a class of mine over a year ago, and I haven't taught her since. And she said her friend mentioned somatics was really great, and she liked my style of teaching. So she was like, I'll give it a go. She came to one of my vinyasa classes ages ago. So she came and joined the somatic practice. And after class, we got talking. And she said, I've been doing ecstatic dance as well. And it has greatly helped my body surrender, open up, let go. That is one of my tips. Now, it sounds really easy to say that. It's how you get there, because it's not overnight. Even me, I remember times when I've been asked to do that on retreats or workshops and be silly, shake your arms, make howling noises, you know, whatever. There was a time when I was a lot more self-conscious of that. And now I couldn't care at all. Like, I just do what my body wants to do. So that was really great to hear from a student who may have been a little more reserved with those slightly more alternative or out of the box ways of moving that aren't seen as normal in the West. We know that Ashtanga classes have come in, and Vinyasa, and we know what that is. That's just kind of up and down movement and like set poses that we can see in a book. So that's okay, because that's like, we've been told that that's okay. So the moment you start saying, be free, let your body do what it wants to do, be guided by the body, tune in, listen. That's the challenge for most. That's what I'm seeing the most. It's starting to change. It's starting to shift. And it really, really warms my heart. I really, really feel that beautiful gratitude to see other people surrender. I remember that magical moment when my body started to do that, and I just started to feel like I had wings. I felt open, free, and able to express myself. That's really funny as well that you say that, because last night I put a post out on Instagram about express yourself. So it's obviously resonating. Be free, create, express, allow that vessel to unfold, and you'll see what, the results and rewards that come back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's different. Everybody's in different stages in their career, in their personal life. And as you were saying, that there was almost a culmination of things that were happening even before, you had pneumonia, and you had to then go through your own internal journey of like, what do I need right now? How do I put myself first? And a lot of times, like, and that's what Kelly's doing right now. She's having to put herself first because she's getting to that brink where her body can no longer tolerate it, right? And so we need to be at that point to go, okay, so I always say this in my practices is we're not listening to our body enough. So the universe or our body will send nudges, like tiny little nudges. And if you don't listen to those whispers will probably get a little bit louder. And then all of a sudden there'll be screams and red flags and bricks thrown at you. And that's when trauma just explodes. That's when sometimes you have big life events that change your world because you haven't listened to those whispers and taken those reroutes, those little detours that you need to take that'll still get you to that end journey. And this is almost like a big life change that's, the universe and whatever you believe in is your inner compass going, you're not listening here. Go come back inwards, because that's where the goodness is. That's where all the joy and the happiness and fulfillment lay. And we tend to get distracted in the outside world, right? With all this power, money, and all of these distractions on social media. So it's kind of understanding that balance. And what I wanted to ask actually, oh, well, you said something amazing on the retreat, and you said nobody has access to you before a certain time in the day. And I love that you said that because I feel the same way. So, what I'm trying to ask is, what are your own go-to practices when you aren't teaching? And what do you as a practitioner do to look after your health and wellness? Like, what are your staples that you're like, non-negotiables? This is what's working for me now. And obviously, that's going to evolve and change during the next phase. But where are you at right now? What's the phase that you're at?
Funnily enough, you hit the nail on the head on that one. Usually my non-access time is before 10 a.m. So you've got me on a special moment. But I know we had to film today, so before I go off traveling. So normally, especially in the winter, haven't cited that yet, but the seasonal rhythm is a big thing for me. That came out of the pneumonia kind of COVID recovery journey. I started really cycling with the seasons a lot more. So in winter, definitely before 10 a.m. is like, you don't get time from me. I don't do practice. I don't teach. I'm in bed. I'm resting. I'll be awake, but I'll probably have my tea. I'll start journaling from around when the sun comes up. That's what I'll do. Another thing, I never use an alarm anymore. Yeah. Okay. So if we're on retreat and I know I'm teaching at 7 a.m., which we were last weekend, I did set an alarm for that just in case I overslept, because
Me
I can't
too.
guarantee that I'll be awake. However, by day to day, my norm, my go-to, never. I don't want to ever have to be woken up artificially. So therefore, everything about my work now, my ethos of my work is it's in rhythm. So I love working, I really do, but I might kind of surface and work till 10 o'clock at night if it's a sunny evening and I'm feeling inspired. If I feel I need to rest, I will obviously take that earlier. If I get a power hour in the day, I'll take that. I'm also really into my human design, so that's another thing which again we could probably talk about separately. A system that is your kind of energetic blueprint and matches up with your natal chart and qigong and I Ching and other ancient kind of systems. So since I've tuned into that, that is another part of my practice. I really ask myself what it is to be my kind of coding as a projector, and that is very much taking rest when needed, listening to the body, not trying to do what everyone else does because they're different types. So yeah, I'll try not to go on about that too much, otherwise I'll just get lost in that human design world. So no alarms, no tech in the bedroom. Now that is still a big challenge for me. Occasionally I like to watch film like we all do. I notice if my mental state is a little bit unbalanced, my tech is my friend.
Say that
So
again. If your mental state is in balance, tech is your friend.
I know, right? It sounds like a bit.
I need a little bit more information on that.
So if I'm feeling completely aligned and balanced,
Mm.
equilibrium, joyful, grateful, everything's kind of going on track, I'm following my manifestations, my dreams, and I'm feeling really topped up and good, I am in a much better place to read a book because I'm not
Absolutely.
tuning into my fears. Okay, so hold on with me on this one. The moment I've just noticed so the moment I start feeling a bit anxious, so anxiety was something a big part of my life before, it's still there, but it doesn't lead my life anymore. It doesn't define me. That's the difference. So it's still very much part of me. It's, that anxiety thread. It it just means that if I have I don't want to say weak, but a more negative thought pattern of that day or a few days, depending on external factors or my cycle can impact that. I've noticed that it's the comfort blanket, Netflix, text friends. Whereas if I'm in a stronger mindset, I don't need that so much. Do you see what I mean?
You blow my mind on this because you've just hit the nail on the head. And I'm literally going through a visualization of what have I done in the last few days? What have I done in the last few evenings? And the most happiest I've been in the last probably 2 weeks. Like I always say, this is the happiest I've ever been, and then it just tops it. So I'm like, I'm almost setting myself up for expectation. So I'm like, this is the happiest I've been. And the last few nights, my binge watching is I'll watch one program of the same series. And then that'll be it, or maybe two episodes, but that's my binge. Like that's what I class as binge. But what I've noticed is I've switched the TV off. I'll either read my book or I'll go straight into meditation. Now I like going into meditation just before bed, but there is something that actually just fell that pull, right? Rather than numbing out on Netflix and going, I'm just delaying my sleep time because I know if I can do that, then I can obviously have a full night's sleep. Don't wake up at silly o'clock in the morning. But you just hit the nail on the head when you were just like, well, wait a second. When you're in your happy place, you're not actually leaning on external methods to comfort you.
Mm. You're right, they're numbers. They're numbing tools
Yeah.
that numb kind of the joy state, really. You know, we again, I feel like I could talk about this in a whole another podcast as well, because I was someone who very much I've always been described as someone who's very bubbly, charismatic. I'm a Taurian, I like sensory pleasures, that's very much me, and you'll probably sense that from talking to me. However, I still had a lot of conditioning in me, and the anxiety would always lead the way. That I'm not
Mm.
good enough, that bad thing's gonna happen, oh, I can't do that, I can't, this is bad, da 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 da. Now, for so long, and this really is a big topic to talk about, in the West, we are led to believe I believe, by media and societal conditioning that pain and suffering and do harder, work harder, you know, do the slog, the longer days show that you're more productive or a better worker. Um, and then you might go home and have to take um, prescribed medicine to cure the headache, to not cure, to soothe the headache. So we're kind of in this constant cycle. We all know this, the rat race kind of cycle that we all have awareness of, that this joy bliss state can only happen once or twice a year when you're on holiday. That little pocket of joy.
That
No,
holiday. Yeah. That's
every
why
day
you're
can
in
be a
bliss state.
holiday.
And you
Now
know
I know.
what? Sorry
Go
to
on.
interrupt. I was going to say that, you know what? I read a study to say that the people who are on holiday actually, as soon as they get their first drink, as soon as they get their first sunset, as soon as they get their first whatever it is, that happiness scale starts to deteriorate. So then they're back into work mode, and actually they don't even enjoy the rest of their holiday. Just adding that in there. There was a study
They're
to
already
that.
thinking about having to go back, and the fear, the Sunday scaries probably started
Yes.
on Wednesday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yeah, carry on. So people are
You know what's
numbing themselves and they're kind of
mm,
like getting distracted and they're feeling that they need to be satisfied, but that's happiness, satisfaction only comes when they're on holiday. But now
yeah,
a fraction of that.
exactly. And this is a I know my views on this are quite like out there. Um, However, honoring my kind of this new approach since COVID, I'm going to share it. We are shifting collectively. There's no doubt about that. That very much was brought to our attention during the pandemic, and some people went back into their old habits, and others brought in new, healthier ones, which was great. What definitely did come out of it was a heightened awareness. I think we can all say what was more important to us, what brought us joy, and often it's the simple pleasures like cooking a nice meal with the family or friends and talking to your neighbor, and that community really came together, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Whatever our
right.
views are on the pandemic and the deeper meanings behind it definitely brought people together in many other ways, and that's what we need more of, and we need more awareness and
Mhm.
time for being present. So that older way, that conditioned way of working in the systems that we've been kind of used to, the 9 to 5 and the 5-day week, we know that that's starting to shift. Yeah, people talk about like that old paradigm. That is very much what that is, and we're gravitating to this new way, this new paradigm of working that suits our health and well-being more. We can walk the dog at lunchtime because we're working from home. We can see a friend for coffee on our break because we're not in the office far away. You know, put some washing on, like just kind of stay on top of life. That's great. However, now we might see that we're working at home, there's new problems because then there's no separation. Tech is everywhere. It's in your bedroom, your home office, da 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 da. You know, where is the separation? And that is the new challenge, to have to find and implement those structures in our own way. And that is also putting trust into our own rhythm, our own system, and our own beliefs, that inner compass, because we're not so much governed by a system that is holding the structure. Does that make sense?
It does. And
Started
I
getting
had a really cool question I've never asked any guest before, but I want to ask you this. So, if you were to change, and I'm so glad this is a great segue, if you were to change the world today, if you had one wish, what would you wish for?
I I do love what the smartphone has brought us. However, I think I would say the smartphone. Now, I would probably say keep a phone, but for me, that has been, and it still is, I openly admit this in my classes to my students, it's my Achilles heel, my weak spot I will go to is the phone. And I've been known to go away and put it in the glove box of my car, because then it's locked away, because if it's in sight, in reach, I'm on it. So the only way of, again, that power of the mind, it's out of sight, out of mind. And that is a big tip, actually, I would also say to someone if they're struggling with that. Yeah, I would probably say smartphone, because yes, it's brought so much glory and connection and convenience. However, what I'm seeing, and what I want to bring into my work even more, is there is no boundary, there is no separation, a bit like what I was just saying about the home working. It's all just rolling in, and we're now having to work doubly hard to implement those structures of boundaries, screen
Yeah.
time on Instagram. I get that thing that says I've been on it more than 15 minutes, and I'll just say ignore it if I want to go back on it, because it's easy. But it
What is
is.
this notification? I'm in the middle of reels here.
Exactly. Or like, well, you know, because if you're a bit addicted to something, you're going to fight through that little tiny message. Some
Yeah.
people might not need that, but if that's your kind of guilty pleasure, you know, it's like if you want the cake, if it's in the fridge, if it's in a box, maybe it's harder to access. It's like, oh, it's, you know,
If
it's
it's in the
fresh, it's new.
supermarket, it's even better.
But if it's like half eaten, it's like just a little bit left to eat. You might, you know, it's
May
easier
as
habit.
well, right? It's gonna go bad otherwise.
Exactly, we justify, don't we? So yeah.
Oh
So
my gosh, that's
I know that's
so
a big
true.
one. Have toyed with it many times. Like, could I get like a Nokia,
Yes, the
so,
old
like, what do you call it?
school.
Yeah, with Snake.
The old school with Snake, and you had to
Yeah,
make up your own ringtones. I loved those days. They're showing our age now.
yeah. I miss that. So I would say that. I know that's contentious for some
It's
people,
really funny because the thing is, it's like
but
the smartphone is the accessibility to knowledge, isn't it? But what knowledge are you seeping in? There's only so much time in the day, there's only so much resources that we have, and we know there's only so much willpower a person has.
mm,
So if we end up being good with our training in the day, or we've been good at our nutrition, as soon as we hit that, I've executed and kind of dwindled my willpower so much during these meetings, during not fighting with a colleague, and trying to quieten your voice at certain points. Like you've gone home and you're like, you know what, I just want this, and it's right there, right? And so this is the thing, it's like that smartphone has that accessibility to go, you can use it for incredible knowledge and incredible power, or you can dwindle it away, and now you've depleted your resources and you're using that as a crutch. So, what do they say? With great power comes great responsibility. People forget that with iPhones, with smartphones. It's just saying
oh,
that you've got so much at the tips of your fingers. You've got so much knowledge that we wouldn't have been able to have access to in the Nokia days. But it's just going, well, what are you doing with that? How strategic are you with that?
Yeah. And I'd also add, yes, there's so much knowledge. However, there's also so much noise.
Yes. So true. I'm so glad you said that. Okay. So pretty much I'm gonna like end the podcast with this one question, but you've already demonstrated how you are unapologetically yourself, especially the way you teach and the way you're shifting through your own knowledge of curiosity, of practicing and taking in all of this information as a practitioner. But for me, I'm not going to ask you what makes you unapologetically you, but I wanted to ask, can you share one thing that you would ask of the audience so they can actually increase their own inner intuition, their own inner guidance, whatever you would call it? Is this something that you do unapologetically that you're like, you know what? I would love for more people to have this dose of joy, fulfillment, happiness,
Mm.
or whatever that one thing brings you?
Yes, I do have that question because I actually also incorporated this in my last class. What brings you freedom? What is freedom to you? And that's one to think about. Maybe on holiday, maybe on a quiet Sunday morning with your coffee, when you're in the garden, really drop into that. What does freedom mean to you?
I think that's perfect. I think the way you thank you so much for evolving all of this journey from where you've been to what you went through and even like these nuggets of wisdom. So I'm so appreciative of you. Like this hour has just gone so quickly.
Thank you for having me. I just want to say that, you mentioned about at the beginning of like, oh, you can come on and share this story without getting emotional and stuff. For many years that I did, and I will put that down to a few other things. I forgot to add in the cold dips. I also do that quite a lot. I do cold showers most days, and all of those things. However, the somatic movement for me, I've shifted through that now. It's not my narrative. It's just something that happened to me. So I, for many years, and again, I actually lost friendships, relationships, some battles with family at the time, because of my mindset and everything. And I was so in this dark place with it. I wasn't seeing clearly. So for at that point, that narrative just completely dictated every day, every minute of every day. And it's and I do have empathy for that, for the people that are going through those times now. And when we say, "Oh, I'm sorry for that," we're not sorry for that. I know that's big, but it's not. We can empathize, but we're not sorry. We can't help what happens to each person. We're on our own journey. We can empathize, but we don't want to take on that as such. Because again, you said something earlier about being a little bit selfish. It's like, it's not selfless. We need to show up for ourselves first. Put on your own oxygen mask before you can put on someone else's. We've also got conditioned into believing that we have to put someone else ahead of ourselves.
Mm,
That's a big point to make as well. But again, for this shift, for this good change, and you're seeing what like has happened through my journey in this. It's very much about not feeling guilty for putting myself first and
absolutely.
changing that narrative.
Absolutely. And I think if we can take we can take so many different nuggets from this podcast, but what does freedom look like to you? I love that question at the end. Just so come back to this podcast, guys. Like sometimes when you listen to something, you've kind of taken it in, but when you listen to the second or the third time, you unpack a little bit more about yourself because you're a different version of yourself when you've heard it and when
Yeah.
you re-listen to things. So same with books, same with other podcasts. So thank you so much, Jesse. I hope you have an amazing holiday.
Thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you again and moving with you and whatever else comes our way. So yeah.
Absolutely. All right, I'll see you soon.
Thanks,
We'll speak
Tulshi.
later. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad that we had Jessie on talking about all of her experiences. If this is something that you resonated with and you haven't already clicked the like button on YouTube, click the like button so more people can find videos like this. hit the subscribe button. So again, we would love for you to be a part of this community when more podcasts like this come out. If you're on Spotify, click the follow button. And if you really did enjoy this podcast, maybe think of somebody that you can share this with. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Thank you so much for supporting us, and we will see you on the next podcast.